Wolfenstein 2 is one of the biggest graphical showcases of the generation so far. A 60 frames per second shooter with beautiful dynamic lighting and shading, GPU accelerated particles and post effects. But as we saw in our previous analysis on PS4, PS4 Pro and Xbox One, Wolfenstein 2 struggles to hold 60 FPS perfectly. Enter the Xbox One X, now the most powerful console on the market, begging the question, what does it bring to the table visually of the PS4 Pro, and also can it at last restore clear 60 FPS gameplay to the franchise on console? First things first, Sony and Microsoft's premium consoles put out great looking renditions of Wolfenstein 2. That said, it's clear PS4 Pro's claim to being a true 4K gaming machine really doesn't hold up in this case, and 2560 by 1440 is the typical native resolution on Sony's machine. The good news for Xbox One X is it's shooting much higher in pixel count and gameplay operates at a peak of 3840 by 2160 where feasible for the engine. In other words, Xbox One X uses a dynamic resolution setup, much like PS4 Pro. The only difference? Well, 4K is the maximum value, the upper bounds of how many pixels can be pushed on Microsoft's machine, while 1440p is the peak resolution possible on PS4 Pro. Okay, so dynamic resolutions on both sides, but just what does that mean to the end result? Well, let's put it this way, a typical in-engine cutscene where you can match rendering load precisely shows Xbox One X tends to drop down from 4K more often than PS4 Pro ever drops from 1440p. In fact, 1440p seems like a fairly conservative target, given how rarely I've seen it go lower on PS4 Pro. So let's put it into example. A cutscene with an explosion in the background triggers Xbox One X to drop its pixel output by 10% to 3648 by 2052. Meanwhile, Pro in this case stays at a straight 2560 by 1440. Even so, it's obviously a much clearer image on Microsoft's machine, and despite the more frequent fluctuations in resolution, you still get over twice the number of pixels from the machine in this case. It's a significant advantage. This is how a majority of the game unfolds. Up close, Xbox One X really does look all the better for its flexibility and resolution, though it's remarkable how often it does hold to 4K. This cutscene here, for example, plays out entirely at that top Ultra HD resolution, whereas PS4 Pro sticks it out at 1440p. Tellingly, there is one unique spot where both drop, a particularly gruesome scene with lots of characters on screen. In this case, Xbox One X takes a hit to 2052p once again, but curiously, on PS4 Pro this scene goes to 2432 by 1368. A matching 10% drop in pixels from 1440p. You get the picture. It's impressive stuff and the payoff is clearly there for Microsoft's choice to go large on GPU processing power and memory bandwidth. There's a limitation to what id Tech 6 can pull off on the machine, as I'll cover later, but in terms of raw image quality comparisons with its closest rival, there's no contest. You want the best looking version of Wolfenstein 2 on console? Get an Xbox One X. With that being said, it'd be unfair to call this a perfect delivery at 4K. Regardless of console, drops in resolution kick in harder during gameplay stress points. This command room is a perfect example of that, an area that drops frames on both machines, causing Xbox One X to lower its res to 2944 by 1656, while PS4 Pro goes down by a smaller margin to 2304 by 1296. These are the lower bounds we've seen on both sides, and it's scaling that only happens to such extremes when the GPU is being contested. Seemingly, anything that involves the CPU simply translates to a frame rate drop. Image quality is the main upgrade then, but there's plenty more to go with that. A comparison with PC running on a GTX 1080 Ti at maximum settings and 4K is telling when put next to an Xbox One X. By comparison, Xbox One X holds up well to a top tier experience on PC, and settings for lighting, post effects and much more are a match here. 3 areas fall short though. You'll notice shadow quality is lower, giving a softer effect on Xbox One X, while anisotropic filtering quality is a step down from the 16x setting on PC. Also, its clear shadowing is missing on both Xbox One X and PS4 Pro, something available only on PC's best presets. Otherwise, both these versions are near identical to one another, and given it's running at 4K, it's a great result. But let's try this another way. Xbox One X vs PS4 Pro reveals just how much Sony's console falls short of the full fat experience. The higher resolution on Xbox One X speaks for itself, but it also visibly raises texture filtering quality. It's leagues ahead when it comes to presentation of floor textures here, and in select spots, the actual quality of materials is improved too. Take this shot as an example. PS4 Pro misses out on some shader adjustments on character skin, which ends up looking simplified without the finer detailing on Xbox One X. Whether this is a glitch or genuinely a lower setting remains to be seen, but the result is more nuanced on Xbox in select areas, though typically textures are identical between the two. Xbox One X again delivers closer to PC's best settings here, though on the flip side, shadow quality is ultimately the same between the two console formats. Here's a telling shot. Self-shadowing from the character gives similar low-res impressions while next to a wall. Even ambient occlusion appears to use the same setting. The end return is this appears to be a more visually complete 4K experience on Xbox One X, but as ever, it's at this point we have to see how the reality of its frame rate measures up. Now, most major cutscenes in Wolfenstein 2 are pre-rendered CG movie files. They look great, but it's useless for frame rate analysis. Instead, I've pitched gameplay side by side. It's not a perfect match by any means, but it gives a good ballpark idea of how the performance range of these consoles bear out. The good news? Pushing to higher resolutions and visual settings doesn't cause Xbox One X to push out a much worse frame rate than PS4 Pro. In fact, they're almost identical to each other in most spots, and without question, performance here is at least better than a standard Xbox One. The bad news is it's still far from a locked 60 FPS. It's clear, even with a dynamic resolution scaler in place to give GPU bandwidth some wiggle room, the game isn't locked to 60 FPS on either format. There's a 50 to 60 FPS range between the two in taxing areas, in spots worse on Xbox One X and in others on PS4 Pro, though in general there's not much between them. The wheelchair bound segment at the start tends to run at 60 FPS at least, and likewise for later stealth based stages. For open areas with lots of AI and physics stacking up, id Tech 6 is doing the best it can with the hardware at hand, but the CPU will be a bigger factor for these scenes. It's not a deal breaker by any means, and I've cherry picked some of the tougher areas for the sake of comparison. But holding 60 FPS consistently is an area I expected to see improved with Xbox One X, even if by a little. Sadly, that's not the case, though at least it turns in a similar performance level to PS4 Pro with the bonus of improved visuals. That's all I have for today. If you did find this type of analysis useful or insightful at all, give those like and subscribe buttons a click below to see more. As a way to see this 4K video at source file quality meanwhile, there's also the option of downloading it at our Patreon at digitalfoundry.net. But until next time, thanks for watching.